My name's Elisa. If you've never met me, my name is Elisa, and welcome back to Sunday Morning Juice, you guys. The movies have been fucking it up. The movies have been fucking it up. I would even like to say Barbenheimer is happening right now, except it is the invite and it is the Odyssey. This is as close as we're gonna get. At the beginning of the invite, Joe complimented Angela, and Angela's response was, "You could tell me that more." And it was in that moment I knew that they were roommates who wore wedding rings. And not just because Joe is visibly living a life that didn't seem very exciting or aligned to what he felt emotionally at the top of the movie, or that Angela's anxiety actually feels like a sip of McDonald's Sprite. But I mostly felt this way because right off the bat, they look like a pair who were together out of comfort rather than by choice. I went to the movies to see this 2 times, and both times I just had this one question blaring in my mind, and I'm bringing it to you. How far can you actually drift in a relationship and it still survive? Typically, when I notice this in relationships, in my own specifically, it's usually because I'm judging the other person. And by that point, I've kind of sabotaged the relationship in my head. I don't even realize that I'm not able to look at them in the same way. And I'm working on it. I'm working on approaching my relationships as the observer first when I see something that I'm just like, I don't love that. I definitely want to judge less because I would want to be judged less. I think I probably judge myself a lot too, and I'm trying to be more compassionate to all. I'm gonna have to give you guys an update on if it's working or not, because usually when I notice those things, I mean, is it salvageable? Sure, but like it requires both parties to have hard conversations, and we all know in this day and age, having a hard conversation with someone, it's easier to get a ticket to see the Odyssey in IMAX, which actually I did do that. I did get a ticket an hour and a half before the showing. That is just because I'm lucky though. Anyway, it's not always romantic partners who stunt your growth. Sometimes it can be the oldest, safest people in your life, because change can threaten the terms a relationship was built on, even if you know, this is a sister or a mom or a dad or something like that. Also, spoiler alert. This is a spoiler alert. There are 4 characters in this movie: Joe, Angela, Hawk, and Pina. Pina and Hawk get invited to Joe and Angela's, their neighbors. And honestly, in the trailer, that's kind of all we know. If you want the actual synopsis, it is linked in the Substack article below, but we're getting into the weeds of the video. So Joe was in a band, and that seemed to be a big dream of his, and that didn't turn out to work the way he'd planned. Now everybody is tiptoeing around him and his music dreams. He's not touching his keyboard the way that he used to. He's not playing his record. Like, it's a very, very touchy subject in their household, and Angela's not pressing him about it. He finally is pressed about it when Hawk and Pina enter his home, and he has to confront this thing that he loved so much that obviously still weighs so much on his life and his day to day. The best way for me to explain it is like if you're around an uncle or like a 35-year-old cousin who almost went pro like 13 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever it may be, and they still manage to bring it up at every family function. Maybe they're not really tiptoeing around almost going pro verbally, but in their actual day-to-day lives, they're definitely playing it safe and stable rather than taking another big swing and trying it in a different arena that's not like a sport. This is that, except Joe like won't even confront that part of his life. And this shows up in a bunch of other ways too. But I also want to tie it into the point: when we're not confronting these things, growth doesn't happen. In this situation, I do really feel like Joe was stunting his own growth. But in partnership, whether it's friend or romantic, when you see someone kind of doing this to themselves, that is something that you want to bring up. And they've been together for decades, so I'm sure eventually she just stopped. I want to talk about those relationships that happen when one person wants growth and the other person maybe doesn't want growth. This shows up in a bunch of different ways. For example, people who treat your self improvement like betrayal, or people constantly comparing you to a version of yourself from years ago, or people who know exactly what they need to do and then they do the exact opposite and then they're just like shitty all day because of it, to you and to everyone around, because they didn't do their thing. An example of this in my life is I had a friend before who always played devil's advocate with me unless I was genuinely disgruntled about something. Like if I was like happy or excited about something, I knew it was devil's advocate o'clock. And they also always used to bring up the past, not really light and cheery moments, and also just like not even my finest moment. Like, haha, remember? And it's like, you bitch. And now I'm not saying that I was completely blameless in that situation. I don't know if there was something that I was doing that annoyed or triggered that person. It genuinely could have been like a trigger or anything like that. But what I do know is when I decided to let that person go and communicate it, because I do think it is important to communicate these things, especially with people you have relationships with. Letting that person go was for the better for myself and for that person also, because I couldn't even show up as my best self when I was around them anymore. In our relationships, whether they're good or they're bad, I do think that there needs to be a moment when we kind of assume the position of the observer, as said in this movie. In this case, that is Pina. She's an outsider. She can see their marriage clearly, and she's not invested in maintaining its illusions. My throat is a little sore. It is a little bit better though. If I sound weird, it's because my throat is funny right now. The observer role that I mentioned before, I'd say that you should ask someone outside of your inner circle to do that if you don't think that that's something that you can do at this time. You want to choose someone outside of your outer circle. One, because they have no interest in feeding your delusions. They don't have any real connection with you and probably the other person that this question is slewing about. However, and this is important, you have to be in a space where you can receive whatever information they've given you. If them swinging one way is going to make you feel a way, that is definitely something that you need to explore. And that's definitely telling. We can't look to people for all of our answers. A lot of our answers come from, honestly, those innate reactions or immediate reactions to something that tells us so much. Now, when I bring up the initial question, how far can you actually drift in a relationship and still survive? Did you have someone specifically come to your mind? If so, walk with me. Joe and Angela had very opposing views about their neighbors having loud sex. Angela was living vicariously through Pina's loud orgasms. Meanwhile, it pissed Joe off, although they were experiencing pain from the same wound. Follow me, follow me. Neither of them actually felt seen or desired in their partnership. Angela was extremely self deprecating. Joe kept asking if he'd be left out of these parties or left out of the partner swap. They weren't honest about their feelings regarding the noise between Hawk and Pina, even when they asked them plainly. Angela did not want him to be honest about it because she thought that their sex life was admirable. Joe acted all big and bad, but when they looked him in the eyes and said, "Does it bother you? Does it bother you, Joe?" He said no. And like that comfort and that stability that they've created which with each other makes them run away from conflict, especially when it's a conflict that they don't know how it's going to end up. Like they don't know Pina and Hawk. They don't know how they're going to respond to things. They don't know these people. So that's probably why they approached it a little bit more from a place of just like being scared. And although Hawk and Pina's honesty did stir conflict, those heavy moments were followed by Joe and Angela actually touching and actually bonding. And there were only a few moments in the movie where we actually saw this, when they were talking about their erotic sexual fantasies, when they were swapping sexual partners, and when the conversation of breaking up came up. If Joe and Angela would not have had the perspective of Hawk and Pina and that energy from them, it's hard to say that they would have been able to break out of this monotonous loop that they were living in, where their love was genuinely just getting swallowed up by this black hole. Crisis does not have to be the end of a relationship. In their case, this crisis was the first time they were actually able to be honest with each other for the first time in probably years. At the end of the movie, we don't know if there was reconciliation or if they decided to separate and live their best lives for themselves and for their daughter, because they hadn't been growing for so long. When the viewer looks at this couple from the outside, they look stunted. And this is a super common occurrence because growth doesn't announce itself. It gets quieter around certain people. And maybe it oozes around other people. And sometimes that oozing doesn't really feel that comfortable. So I will leave you with this. When does a relationship deserve the recovery attempt? Or when is that recovery attempt just out of habit? I love the movie The Invite. I don't know if you guys saw it yet. I really, really recommend it. I really, really recommend the theater experience. Both time I went to the theater, I went alone, and we were hooping and hollering in that theater, and it was also sad. And I also, like, some tears swelled up in my eyes. It was an experience. It was a treat. It was eye opening. It was mind opening, and yeah. Anyway, I'm going to keep rambling, you guys. See you next week.